one of the most explosive things we've had this century in scholarship, this last century, has been the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which I am continually fascinated by. The Dead Sea Scrolls are a kind of a parallel to early Christianity in some ways and not others. Or if you like, in family relationships, the Dead Sea Scrolls are like a sort of a second cousin to early Christianity, because the people who wrote those scrolls believed that God had secretly renewed the covenant with them, so that they had forgiveness of sins, they had the Holy Spirit, they were the real returned from exile people. The early Christians believed all that as well. Some people think that the Essenes had somebody they believed was the Messiah, the teacher of righteousness. That's controversial. The early Christians believed that Jesus was the Messiah. However, the Essenes drew from all that the conclusion that they should belong to a community which was more and more tightly defined, with ever decreasing tight circles of Torah obedience. The early Christians believed that what had happened meant that they had to go out into all the world, irrespective of the restrictions of Torah, and invite all and sundry to come and celebrate. That's radically different. Why did they believe those different things? Because of the different people at the heart of the movements. The teacher of righteousness had been a teacher of an ever stricter form of priestly holiness. Jesus of Nazareth had been crucified and raised from the dead. Therein lies the radical difference between the two movements. Now, John the Baptist is poised uneasily in between. I don't think John was an Essene, but it's highly likely that he drew some original support from the Essenes, because it's the Essenes who, in their chronology, had calculated that the Messiah ought to be born sometime around what we call the end of the 1st century BC. So it's quite likely that Essenes in the 20s of the 1st century would have been looking for somebody in his 20s to show up who might be a Messiah or a prophet or somebody. It's quite likely that some Essenes went with John. John's baptism was a one-off. It wasn't a regular washing like the Essenes' regular washings. And John was pointing to a Messiah who was going to come, not back to a teacher of righteousness who would give you a tighter Torah. So there are differences between John and the Essenes, but I think any Essene might well have looked at John just up the road and said, maybe this is actually what we've been waiting for. And then I think it's quite possible that many Essenes might then have gone to Jesus. They would have found a movement which, like finding a cousin you didn't know you had, looks a little bit like family, but also is doing some things radically differently.